Hi all, my name is Rich McCarty, and I am coming to you from Erie, Pennsylvania, where I am a professor of religious studies at Mercyhurst University. Before I was here, I did my PhD at the University of Iowa, and my areas of study have been in religion and ethics, writing books on that, teaching classes, giving presentations, not only to my academy, but across the country. And so somebody might wonder, what is a religious studies professor doing talking about the paranormal? And my answer to that, first of all, is, well, why not? And I think that the religious studies is a domain, as I'll share with you tonight, or a field rather, that I think should be studying the paranormal, and I think it should be taken seriously. I've also been very grateful to have Ryan, our conference host, give a guest lecture at this university, and my students have read his book. So I think there's a lot of good reasons why religious studies scholars should be studying the paranormal from an academic perspective. And I have found in my own study, I'm currently writing a book on religion and the paranormal, that there are a lot of intersections between the categories of religion and paranormal. And sometimes I think that those categories have been rigidly separated a little bit too much. So today I'd like to share with you why I think that it's important for scholars of religion to study the paranormal, as well as to take a look at how paranormal beliefs and subjects and phenomena, I believe, are actually transforming conventional religious belief, as well as leading to some transformations of religious belief. So one of the things that I think that we have to ask ourselves is, yes, why in the world is a religious studies professor interested in the paranormal? And as I said, first of all, well, why not? But I think that what we first need to have is a definition of religion itself. You know, in the study of religion, scholars don't agree about what religion is, even though we have an entire field organized around it. So each one of us as scholars has to have some guiding definitions of religion in order for us to engage in our own work. There are three different definitions of religion that I have found helpful over my career and that guide me in my own research. And I guess I should also say to you that the study of religion is investigating some aspect of religion somehow and in some way. And I'm reminded, for example, of Paul Tillich, who often defined or described religion as having to do with concepts of ultimate reality. Now, you might be wondering, well, what in the world does that mean? I tend to tell my students when we think about ultimate reality, these are kind of like your 3 a.m. conversations. Have you ever had those before where you're with your friends, conversations going a little bit deeper, and somebody asks you a question about what do you believe? For example, is there a God? Is reincarnation true? Those kinds of questions. I grew up in Iowa, and I remember when I was a teenager, sometimes I would go out and lay in a field and look up into the sky at night and see the stars, and just seeing all the stars would just kind of evoke questions in me, like, is there a purpose for us being here? Did anything create this? I don't think I'm alone in asking those kinds of questions, and they often come up with our friends. And so the answers that we provide to our ultimate questions are our ultimate answers. And people will answer those ultimate questions in different ways. So, for example, some have asked the question, is there something or someone that created all things? And some people's answer to that is no. Well, that's still an ultimate answer. That still frames concepts of ultimate reality. Now, other folks have said, yes, there is either something, a force, a karmic stream, a God, something has created all this. And when you posit that the answer is yes, all of a sudden your sense of ultimate reality grows exponentially. Suddenly we're talking about things that cannot be put under a microscope, so to speak. You're talking about things that transcend the scientific and begin to talk about matters of faith that one might have. So when we study religion, we study either concepts of ultimate reality, or as one of my great mentors, Diana Cates, wrote, she's a religious ethicist. She said that religions can be conceived of as frameworks about what people think is possible in life and death, given the way things really are. Again, transcending the empirical scientific question and asking things that go far beyond materialism itself. So if we study religion this way, then we're going to be investigating people's beliefs. We're going to be asking them, tell me what you think is possible in life and death and why. Again, one answer to that question might be something like, well, I think that this is pretty much it, right? And that's what makes life valuable. Others might say, well, this is it, but there is a larger supernatural reality around us. Others still might say, well, we're living this life now, but life is unfolding and we will unfold from this material realm into a spiritual realm. Like, you know, right, how people sometimes will provide for you explanations of what they think is possible in life and death. Well, if you think about that, when you start to provide those kinds of more specific answers about what you think is possible in life, suddenly that informs what you find to be valuable, and that's the domain of ethics. So we can study religion as a matter of ultimate reality. We can go in a little bit more specifically and say, what do individual people or traditions think about what is possible in life and death, given the way things really are? Or I also think about, you know, when I was an undergraduate studying religious studies for the first time, one of the first scholars that I read was Julia Corbett-Haymeyer, and she described religion as a system of beliefs, values, rituals, institutions, and so forth, with respect to supernatural and or sacred entities, realms, and states of being. Now, why do I share this with you? Because I think sometimes people think that all religious studies professors are theologians that have a particular belief or belong to a particular religious system, and they're advocating that this one thing is true. Yes, there are some people that take that approach to the study of religion. A lot of us, though, regardless of what we believe or don't believe, a lot of us study religion because it is deeply human, and therefore it is incredibly important. I think the last census that I showed globally showed that somewhere around 85% of the world plus has some kind of religious identity. Even if they don't belong to a formal organization, they have a set of beliefs about ultimate reality, or they have a framework for thinking about what is possible in life and death, given the way things really are, that attends to some kind of supernatural or sacred reality. So that means that, you know, the planet that we're currently living on and the times in which we're living, religion really is important, regardless if one is religious or not. And so as a scholar of religion looking at it this way, and then I ask the question again, why is a scholar of religion thinking about or studying the paranormal? I think some of you might already be putting this together, that those subjects and phenomena and beliefs that have been categorized as the paranormal, they very much, I think, fall in line with some of these definitions of religion, or these descriptions of what it is that religious studies scholars do. So in your own mind right now, think about what kind of paranormal subjects might actually lead to different concepts of ultimate reality. Think about different paranormal subjects and how they provide for frameworks for how people think about what is possible in life and death, given the way things really are. And then you might even go a little bit deeper, and I'll say a little bit more here at the end of my presentation today, but we can also think about how paranormal phenomena and beliefs, I think, very clearly have led to the construction of systems and communities and particular belief systems. There are some paranormal stories that are taken as more authoritative than others in the literature, the lore, on TV shows or conferences like this one. So I'm paying attention to all of this, and I'm saying to myself, yeah, I do think that paranormal subjects very often are in the domain of the religious, as I study religion. So trying to be a good academic here, I have a couple of theses, two working theses for you all to consider, and I'd be happy to talk more about these later if any of you are interested in chatting after the conference is over. But my first working thesis is this, that it is incorrect for us to presume that the paranormal and religion are categorically separate. My guess will be a lot of you already intuitively agree with me that the paranormal as a category and the religion as a category are not, they're not opposites, right? But there tends to be a lot of overlap and really kind of interesting dynamic interplay between these categories that we've been given. But here's the reality, and I want to explain a little bit why in just a few moments. Religion and the paranormal have been treated as dichotomies. They don't exist together. So I want to kind of explore why these two things have been pulled apart or not talked about more seriously in the academy. And then hopefully you'll agree with me, but we can talk more about why I just don't think that these two categories are separate from each other. And then my second thesis is that I believe that upon inspection, many paranormal subjects, beliefs, practices, and communities very much express that which scholars otherwise categorize as belonging to the domain of the religion. This is, I think, one of my professional frustrations is I will go to a national, international conference every year where there's more workshops than you could possibly attend in the study of religion. And some of them have to do with pilgrimage, and some of them have to do with ancestral worship, and some of them have to do with sacraments, on and on. And all of these things, and rightly so, are treated seriously as things that people deeply believe in and traditions have grown around. And yet, when it comes to the paranormal, there has not historically been the same level of serious study, in my opinion, by religious studies professors of paranormal phenomena that very much are behaving religiously. Now, they're not always the same thing, but I do have this frustration that scholars of religion have either historically not taken paranormal subjects very seriously, or too many today still don't take paranormal subjects very seriously. And I believe the reason for that is due to the way that the category of the paranormal was actually crafted and defined over the last couple of centuries. And that's something that I would like to share with you for a few moments. So if we ask the question, what do we mean by the paranormal? You and I might have a kind of a conventional understanding of what paranormal means. I can put on streaming TV and go to the particular service, and I can search for paranormal, and it will bring up a number of subjects that is probably exactly what I'm looking for, right? Or maybe what you're looking for as well. So I think that we have a conventional understanding of the paranormal, but all words have an origin. And I think it's important for us to know the origin of the word paranormal and to see how it has indeed shifted over time. So there is an amazing scholar at Rice University. He's a senior religious studies scholar, Dr. Jeffrey Kripal. And he has a number of academic texts on the paranormal. I highly recommend him to you among a few scholars that you may be aware of. And in his book, Authors of the Impossible, he writes about this. He says, all right, so what does the word paranormal actually mean beyond our 21st century conventional cultural understanding of it, whether it's here in the United States, North America, or globally? And what he points out is that somewhere in the late 19th century to the early part of the 20th century, certainly here in North America, I think this may apply to a certain extent in Western Europe. But in this period of time, the word paranormal was innovated or conceived as a category for, and let's just use his words that hopefully you can see on the screen. He said that in this time, the word paranormal, or the category paranormal, referred to a way of referring to physical or quasi-physical events, often of an outrageous or impossible nature, that were believed to be controlled by yet unknown physical natural laws. Now, what Dr. Kripal means by this is that you have folks saying things like levitation of tables is possible by engaging in energetic, potentially psychic, maybe mediumship powers, that type of thing. But during this time, folks were saying, okay, so tables might be levitating. There might be spirit communication in this new tradition called spiritualism. There might be a whole host of things that, for a lack of better term, look spooky, right? Or not natural. But these folks said, no, actually, ghost communication, table levitation, mind reading, you name it. It's super, right? It's in the sense of, yeah, it's supernatural. It seems beyond what we're used to, but it's actually part of a natural world, but a natural world that we don't understand yet. So yes, we can talk about the supernatural, but as Jeffrey Kripal does in his work, he says, put a space between the word super and natural. And in this sense, perhaps the natural world, from this definition, the natural world has far more to it than we can currently understand, and we simply need an improved kind of science to help us understand why tables float, ghosts visit us, mediums can talk to the dead, on and on and on, right? So that's where the word actually originates from, and that's important because there is a sense, if you go back and look in the archives of history, there is a sense that people really were investigating technologies, literally technologies, to try and figure out how all of this supernatural activity was occurring. But then a shift occurs, and the shift occurs by the mid 20th century and certainly on into the early 21st century. And here I lean on sociologists of religion, Christopher Baden, F. Carson Mencken, and Joseph Baker. Their text, now in a second edition, Paranormal America, is really a valuable text for those of you who may want to engage in an academic study of the paranormal from the lens of religious studies. They capture sociological demographic data on who believes what. They break it down in terms of different categories. Super interesting stuff, right? And they write well, right? So they take you into the weeds of demographic and sociological data, but they do it in a way that I think is digestible and actually very interesting. But all that said, what they note is that by the mid 20th century, early 21st century, sociologically speaking, culturally speaking, suddenly the paranormal went from being a category of yet unknown natural phenomenon that looks super to their definition here, that the paranormal is read by culture, again, largely North American culture, but the paranormal is read as beliefs, practices, and experiences that are not recognized by science and not associated with mainstream religion, often perceived as bizarre, fringe, fictitious, and even deviant. Now that's a big change, right? So how do we go from the late 19th century, early 20th century, where people are saying, hey, maybe there's something to this, we just need a new science, to the 20th century and now into the 21st century, where if you say paranormal, you're saying it almost like winking your eye. Like, have you ever noticed whenever there's a story about maybe a haunting on the local news, well, even national news, a UFO, UAP sighting, very often the people who are reporting it, they'll wink, they'll nod, they'll laugh, like this isn't all that serious. Well, why, right? And the reason why it appears, at least culturally, sociologically, demographically, is that the word paranormal started to be seen as really unserious stuff. And I think one part of that is there were a number of cases, late 19th century, early 20th century, where a lot of people were interested in the paranormal as earlier defined, only to find out that, some large seances, spirit communications, table levitation, that these were hoaxes, right? And we know that, right? This happens in all religious traditions. Let me just put it that way. You can always find someone in a given religious tradition who is either not the best representative of it, is taking advantage of it, or trying to take advantage of other people. And sadly enough, the idea of things like ghosts, spirits, monsters, and I think, to a certain extent as well, UFOs, extraterrestrials, maybe interdimensional beings, a lot of this just now is seen as people who are serious don't take that seriously. And so paranormal then becomes this category that's set aside. And this is what I think really happens, why religion and the paranormal have been split apart so much, is all of a sudden paranormal feels more like what I turn on the TV or go to the movie in order to get a thrill, right? To be entertained, largely fiction. Like there's no way this is possibly real. I think a lot of people conflate the paranormal as fictitious and unserious with literary devices like monsters, like whether it's the Frankenstein or even like contemporary vampires, like on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, things like that. They see those kind of creatures or those kind of stories as things that are made up to entertain us such that when people say, I've had this experience of UFO sighting, abduction, spirit visitation, monster encounter, it's so ingrained in this culture and in so many others just not to take it seriously that we laugh at it. And therefore, those who then do take paranormal subjects seriously are seen as bizarre, fringe, and even, as these sociologists say, even deviant, right? That there's something not quite right about them. Or maybe a question, why would you spend time, any time whatsoever, talking about studying these kinds of things? So I don't think we should underestimate or undersell how powerful cultural definitions of the paranormal have shaped an attitude about what we're talking about here, largely. And I know all of us are doing so in different ways. But if you say something like, I'm giving a talk at a paranormal conference, or hey, this weekend I'm going to watch several hours of an online paranormal conference, I can almost guarantee you that somebody is going to smirk and laugh at you if they don't understand how serious you take it or how serious that we take it. So because of that 20th, 21st century invention of the paranormal as unserious, we have to take, now we have to take seriously that all that definition, and let me just go back to that slide for you, all that definition of the paranormal as unserious is based on this concept of, well, it's not scientific in the way that we understand science now. And then that second part, it's not mainstream religion. Well, now come on. There's always been a problem with appealing to what is mainstream or appealing to what is normal. That's a social construction. Normal and mainstream are completely dependent upon how many people at a particular time believe in something. Take another religious tradition. For example, take very early Christianity. Like we're talking first century Christianity. First century Christianity wasn't mainstream. It wasn't normal. A lot of people thought it was quite bizarre. Many Romans thought that the early Christians were cannibals, atheists, and orgiasts because of the way that they talked about their faith and didn't accept the religion of the empire. So even that example of a religion that would become a major dominant global religion itself has the experience of knowing that, hey, mainstream doesn't actually tell us anything about the veracity of a claim, let alone I don't think it should be the standard by which we judge if something is serious or not. And I want to give you a couple examples from the modern period about why mainstream should not be our standard of what we take seriously or what we study, especially in religious studies. So just down the road from me, some of you may be familiar with it, is the Lilydale Assembly. It is in Western New York. I'm here in Erie. It takes me about maybe 45 minutes to get to the Lilydale Assembly. For those of you who are interested in the religion of spiritualism, so mediumship, healing temples, all that, this would be a place for you to go and check it out. Well, the Lilydale Assembly in New York has either public spirit readings, hundreds of people gather, and various different mediums come forward and they reach out with messages. You can do arrange private readings with mediums for spirit communication. There are a couple of different sanctuaries for healing, both almost like one is like a temple or church-like structure where you go in, where there are spirit healers there. Others are outdoor. There's a really interesting fairy trail. It goes on and on and on. So Lilydale is an interesting example for somebody like me as a scholar of religious studies, because if you ask maybe, the I suppose everyday person on the street, what do you think about mediumship, psychics, spiritual healing, nature magic, things like that? Again, my bet would be you would find a number of people in mainstream America who would designate those kind of phenomena or subjects as paranormal. Now that's interesting because Lilydale, the Lilydale Assembly, identifies itself as the largest center for the religion of spiritualism. So you see what happened there. The Lilydale Assembly understands that it is a center of a particular religion. People on the outside in culture look at it and say, that doesn't look mainstream what they're doing in there compared to religion X, Y, and Z. Therefore, that's paranormal stuff, right? So you get, for Lilydale in particular, you'll get people who will just kind of smirk and say, oh yeah, that out there. more seriously, I've seen protests there for those who think that something nefarious is going on from a theological perspective. So I can see, if you came to Erie, I could take you to Lilydale and I could show you how those categories of religion and paranormal just get pretty shifty on the basis of who's answering the question about what do you see happening in that assembly. Now, compare and contrast the Lilydale assembly with the Museum of Holy Souls in Purgatory, which you can go to if you are in Rome or you take a trip to Rome. And if you go into the Museum of the Holy Souls in Purgatory, what you will find there are a variety of artifacts that the museum keepers say that people claim that there are burned handprints from spirits in purgatory on clothing and furniture, or fingerprints from spirits in purgatory on the pages of the Bible to remind their loved ones, their family and friends, a Catholic belief. Keep praying for me. I'm in purgatory. I want out and I want to get to heaven, right? That's a lecture for another day. But I want you to think about this. Christianity is one of the world's largest religions. Roman Catholicism is Christianity's largest denomination currently on the planet. And so these spirit encounters of burned handprints on clothing and furniture and fingers on Bibles, that phenomena is read as religious phenomena, not paranormal phenomena, but religious phenomena, and deeply confirms a traditional Christian belief that there are three tiers to the afterlife: heaven, purgatory, and hell. But you show somebody in the buckle of the Bible Belt in the United States that there is a museum in Rome with handprints on furniture, and that this is a sign that spirits are coming through from purgatory. And I can promise you that in the buckle of the Bible Belt in the United States, you'll find a number of other Christians of maybe evangelical or fundamentalist persuasions that will take a look at the artifacts in that museum, and they'll say that that's fringe, that's heretical, that's not true, or it's paranormal, right? And that's, for me, the interesting part is I can go 45 minutes down the road from where I'm sitting right now and see phenomena that is not the same, but similar to what I can do if I get in a plane and fly 7 hours to Rome and then walk the river and then walk into this museum. And I can see phenomenon that look almost identical, but on the basis of what is coded as, quote, mainstream and normal, one then is seen as a religion, and one is seen as paranormal. This is why I say I don't think that categorically religion and the paranormal are separate. I think that movement in the 20th, now 21st century, of basically calling the paranormal deviant, fringe, bizarre, unserious, I think that is what is culturally informing people or motivating people before they even know they're being motivated to see paranormal subjects as unserious and not worth our time. So that leads me to the conclusion, as a scholar of religion, that religion and the paranormal are not opposites. And I want to say this: if religious phenomena and beliefs are concerned with ultimate reality, or they provide answers to what is possible in life and death, given the way things really are, and I don't think one can help but read many paranormal phenomena, maybe not all paranormal phenomena, but I don't think we can help but read many paranormal phenomena and beliefs as religious in that sense. And this is not a gotcha moment, right? Because some people don't like the word religion. They don't like being described as religious. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm saying, as a scholar of religion, when you take a look at definitions of religion as ultimate reality, frameworks for what is possible in life and death, given what is real, systems of beliefs, lifestyles, values, rituals, having to do with the supernatural or sacred. What I'm saying is, when you define religion that way, academically or theoretically, then so many what has been coded as paranormal subjects, experiences, phenomena, you name it, it fits, right? It strikes me that religion and the paranormal are indeed overlapping, and that we don't just have to guess about that, but by being very specific theoretically and with our definitions, we can show people how serious the category of paranormal is as deeply held beliefs in people's lives. And actually, I'd like to, and I didn't ask Ryan for permission first, so I hope this is okay. But when I teach Ryan's book at the university, Somewhere in the Skies, with apologies if my picture here is covering up Ryan's name, one of the things that I do with my students is we do a very careful read of Ryan's book. And we often go line by line, looking for examples of how, in this case, UFO or UAP phenomenon and belief in those and experiences of those, how they might function in a religious way according to the definitions of religion that I have given you. Let me just give you a couple of lines and examples from Ryan's book. And again, Ryan, thank you for allowing me to do so, since I didn't ask you in advance. If you take a look at Somewhere in the Skies, A Human Approach to the UFO Phenomenon, if you read Kieran Woodhouse's story on pages 55 to 60 of this book, we find Kieran saying this, and let's just allow the words to speak for themselves. I won't give ongoing interpretation of them, but I think you'll begin to see why I'm analyzing these things the way that I am. Kieran says, "I find myself more than ever completely open to any and everything. Since the sighting, it has opened up a world of synchronicity that has led me to where I currently am in my life, a full immersion into the realm of the unknown." Ultimate reality. Let's take a look at Dr. Robert Davis, having encountered orbs in Sedona, Arizona, pages 95 through 101 in the book. Dr. Davis writes, or says rather, "In general, these experiences have been reported too often," sorry, that's my typo, too often facilitate dramatic and positive changes in one's personal and philosophical viewpoints on life, love, death, and spirituality. Here would be an example of if seeing orbs reframes what you think is possible in life and death, given the way things really are, then you begin to shift your value system. Again, the domain of ethics. One more. Reverend Michael Carter. And I thought this was an interesting one because in addition to my own academic work, I'm also ordained. I'm ordained in the United Church of Christ and think about these things from a theological perspective when I'm not doing my academic work day in and day out. On page 151 through 159 of the book, Reverend Carter says this: "I wanted to continue searching for meaning in this other realm of what I considered extraterrestrial intervention in tandem with my own spiritual journey. This led me to write my Master of Divinity thesis on the connection between UFOs and the Bible, something I know sounds controversial, but with an open mind, it is quite apparent and can be interpreted many different ways." Now that one, I think, really proves, points to what I'm talking about here, if it doesn't prove my point, that, here Reverend Carter is saying UFOs in the Bible sounds controversial. Well, ask yourself the question, why? Why would that be controversial? The Bible, after all, has characters, and I'm not putting this down, please. The Bible has characters like talking snakes in the second creation story. It has flying wheels within wheels on fire with eyeballs all over it. There are so many different quite frankly, astounding characters and incidents in the Bible that to say something like UFOs in the Bible, that really shouldn't strike us as, oh, that's controversial. It should just strike us as, why do you think so, right? Of the many things that are in the Bible, why would you say that? And I think that he's saying that in part because he also knows that the paranormal has been categorized as deviant, bizarre, heretical, unserious. So here he is, a clergy person, seeking to pull from a category that has been very marginalized and stigmatized in this culture, and saying, no, there's really something there with our sacred text. I really think that these examples, and so many others from Ryan's book, point to how it is that the paranormal and the religion overlap with one another, and that they are not separate categories. So for me then, coming back to the academic study of religion, I want to say this. In religious studies, as an academic field and discipline with our own academy, I don't want to get rid of the word paranormal, but I do want to destigmatize it. I want to take away any of the unflattering language about it. I want to make sure that when we talk about the paranormal, it is not with winks and nods and laughs, but we take it very seriously. So we have the word. Can we reclaim the word paranormal, maybe in a third shift of its definition, in religious studies and have it serve as a meaningful umbrella category? Because we all know that the paranormal seems to house many different things together, not all of which seem to go together. Some people think that they do. But what if we simply said that the paranormal as a meaningful category for the study of religion provides for us subjects, phenomena, experience, beliefs, believers, communities, you name it, that yes, are outside of current scientific or exceed scientific explanation, and that they don't fit neatly in any one given religious tradition. I think that's fair, right? Because in some sense, it's kind of wedding together that late 19th century, early 20th century definition of religion and acknowledging respectfully what people are calling paranormal today in a way that they don't mean, hey, I'm not serious about this. So I'm not saying this is the working definition of the paranormal. That's part of the project I'm working on in my book right now. But I do think that we can start to have some kind of working definition of paranormal that reclaims the word without engaging in stigma or marginalization. And here's why I think this is important too. So if we go back to our sociologist of religion in that book, Paranormal America, what they found in their own polling is that 68% of people in the United States professed belief in at least one paranormal subject, including things like UFOs, monsters, ghosts, psychic abilities, and their list is long. Take a look at the book itself. But I find that to be really interesting because if on the one hand, our culture is using the word paranormal to marginalize and stigmatize, right? And that's true, right? They are. We know how that happens. Maybe we've been on the receiving end of that ourselves. On the other hand, the very same culture that is shaping people to believe that the paranormal is not serious, in the very same culture, 68% of people have belief and a serious belief in at least one of those subjects. And what this also means when you take a look at who's being polled, and I can't break it down to everybody who was asked a question, but many of these people who answered these polls, they also identify with what is considered, quote unquote, a mainstream religious group. So it's something like, the Roman Catholic who is going to mass in the state of New York might also be a UFO hunter. And I mean that in the best sense, right? Or the mainline Protestant is also going out and searching after Bigfoot. So it's not that there's like this group of people who only believe in the paranormal, or they have one paranormal belief and that is what they believe in. It's that this big umbrella category with multiple different subjects underneath it, you're finding that people believe in at least one of them, and then they also have their own religious tradition as well. Just another piece of evidence why religion and the paranormal are very practically speaking overlapping. And I'd also go so far as to say that I think that because this is true, and it's evidence to be true, that many, if not most people, believe in at least one paranormal subject, and many of those people also belong to another established religious tradition, I think that there is building evidence to show us that paranormal beliefs are transforming conventional religious beliefs, whether that is person by person or tradition by tradition. Let me give you one example that we know for sure, where we see some initial evidence that a paranormal belief is actually shaping, potentially reshaping traditional religious belief. So let's think about the Roman Catholic tradition. All right, so here's a picture of St. Peter's, if you've ever been to Vatican City. And in 2008, the director of the Vatican Observatory was asked questions about the potentiality of extraterrestrial life in the universe. You may remember this if you follow this. And if there is, how would that bear on the Roman Catholic tradition together? This is what he said. So the Reverend Jose Gabriel Funes said, how can we rule out that life may have developed elsewhere? Just as we consider earthly creatures as a brother and sister, why should we not talk about an extraterrestrial brother? It would still be part of creation. He goes on to say, such a notion doesn't contradict, excuse me, my typo, contradict our faith, and ruling out the existence of extraterrestrials would be putting limits on God's creative freedom. Now, I want you to think about that. He did not say that there are extraterrestrials and that the Vatican has met together in a conclave in order to affirm that they exist and that it fits with the Catholic faith. They didn't say that, right? Sometimes we can run a little bit too far. But what he is saying, as not the representative or spokesperson of the Vatican, but what he's saying is, yeah, the probability is high, right? That there are others out there. And if you reflect on other rational creatures in the universe, well, then they are just as much children of God as anyone else. Now, I think that's significant because, in the history of humanity, it was only a few centuries ago that folks like Galileo and Copernicus were being threatened with with excommunication and more for simply stating that the Earth goes around the sun, because certain religious figures said, no. Based on scripture and tradition, we happen to know that the sun goes around the Earth, and that was a very serious moment in history, where and a deep divide for a very long time. So the fact that we are at a place where one person within the same tradition has said, hey, maybe there are extraterrestrial beings means this. A number of people on this planet, a lot of people on this planet, have had sightings of things they cannot explain. It would appear from various congressional hearings and whistleblowers that while a number of these things might be things that are classified, some of them we just don't know what they are, right? A whole host of other people have reported seeing either extraterrestrial or interdimensional beings. Let's just keep it extraterrestrial from now. On the basis of these people and groups reporting on what has otherwise been categorized as a paranormal phenomenon, all of a sudden you have a very serious religious leader or figure suggesting his faith could shift to incorporated, and that it may have to, right? I think that's really fascinating, and I would encourage us to keep our eyes open on how that's happening throughout the world. But I would even say this, let's look more closely. I think, speaking of Copernicus, that paranormal phenomena and beliefs may already be or soon cause Copernican-like shifts in traditional religious beliefs. And I want to give you a few examples of why, and this is something I could talk about for a long time, so I'll try to keep myself brief. Let's take UFO, UAP, extraterrestrial subjects, beliefs. If there are indeed extraterrestrials in this universe, and they visited us, or at least as the hypothesis goes, that would require us to rethink a number of things. For example, if you thought just in terms of ethics, we would have to be much more careful about how we define a person. Why do I say that? Very often, currently, in many of our cultural debates, whether it's around issues like euthanasia or reproductive rights, abortion, many times people equate biological genetic humanity with personhood. So, for example, if somebody is opposed to euthanasia at the end of life, helping somebody who's terminally ill come to an end, right? Or if they're opposed to the reproductive choice of abortion, very often they will frame those kinds of arguments this way. They'll say, you can't or you shouldn't do that because you're killing a person. Well, what they tend to do is they associate personhood with genetic humanity. But personhood and genetic humanity, at least philosophically, are not exactly the same thing. If we go deep into the woods here, even some early Christian theologians said that you're not a person until you get a soul. And then the big question was, well, when do you get a soul, right? And that's another lecture for later. Well, now let's come back to the UFO ET issue. If there are other rational beings in the universe, and presuming they are not genetically human, They're people. They are people with rights. So the UFO ET phenomena would have us be much more careful to say personhood is not equivalent with being biologically human or even biologically human alive. Personhood must be a set of a criteria of things that emerge in rational creatures. This would also have implications talking about animal rights on the planet. So, with UFOs and ETs, I think we would soon have to realize, okay, if they are not human, but they're rational beings, they are people, but they're not human. I think that would be significant in how we start thinking about ethics on this planet. Let's go a little bit more theological with the UFO ET connection. If there are other rational creatures that have emerged or evolved on other planets, and let's just say God, or what we think of as God, is behind that, then all of a sudden concepts of creation have to be very different. That would certainly challenge, and I don't say this with any disrespect, but it would certainly challenge any fundamentalist view of reading the first three chapters of the Jewish book of Genesis. And you'd have to be much more open and creative with what those stories mean, and understanding that, the nature of reality is not limited to those. Now, listen, a number of Jewish and Christian traditions have already made that move, but I think that having proverbially the ET land on the lawn of the White House would force you to realize that, well, the Bible's not a science book, right? And the nature of creation is going to have to be understood very differently. Third, with UFOs and ETs, I want to zoom in back into Christianity for a moment, and with apologies if you think I'm giving a prioritization to Christianity, it just happens to be one of the areas of my specialty in my academic study. But think about how it is that a number of Christians talk about salvation. And again, I say this with no disrespect and quite frankly, no agenda. But there are a number of Christians who will say things like, a person must believe in Jesus of Nazareth, that he died on the cross and rose from the grave in order to be saved or experience eternal life, right? I think you probably heard this formula before. Well, okay, but if there are UFOs, I mean, if there are extraterrestrial beings out there, they've probably never heard of Jesus, right? That would not be possible. So all of a sudden, if you are a Christian, you'd have to rethink through, well, what was really going on in the death of Jesus? Was it transactional for Earth only, right? Or is it more of a demonstration of, hey, God is forgiving even when bad things happen? We'd have to rethink everything. And I'm just using Christianity as an example, but in many religious traditions, the existence of other beings in the universe would necessitate at least revisiting, if not revising, what folks claim is true. Now, I will tell you this too. Sociologists of religion have demonstrated quite well that because UFOs and ETs cause such theological and moral questions, a common interpretive move in evangelical and fundamentalist circles is not to deny that UFOs are visiting us or people are seeing them, and not to deny that there are beings behind it. But many fundamentalist and evangelical Christians are actually claiming that the UFO ET phenomenon is actually demonic, that it's a deception because there's only one truth, they would say, and that truth is found within the biblical text as they interpret it. So keep your eye out for that, because I do think we're seeing more and more evidence that there may be people who want to control how we talk about the extraterrestrial hypothesis from a very, very narrow theological lens. Let's also consider, for example, ghosts. Ghosts have been, I think in most cultures, but again, depending on what you believe about the afterlife, there'd be a shift there. Let's think maybe generic monotheism where not everybody, but a number of people talk about heaven or hell, right? And you go to one place or you go to the other. Well, if ghosts are visiting us, what does that say about the afterlife, right? Does that mean that ghosts freely roam in and out of the gates of whatever state of being that they're in? And, and I suppose this is a hypothetical question until you have an encounter yourself. And especially if you are a person of a particular kind of faith who never entertained the possibility that a spirit either actually survives the body, or B, if you've never entertained that the spirit might not just go to one place or another, but might be roaming around, what would that do? It will require a shift in what you believe and potentially even for your religious community. Last one here that I want to think about briefly with you, monsters. So I got to tell you, in the study of religion, monsters are often interpreted as symbols of culture. And in some cases, I think that's just deeply true. Certainly in works of fiction, it is purposefully true. I think that there are some cases where a monster story might actually tell us more about what a community is afraid about or some of their anxieties, and then they kind of create an object to put their anxieties on, and that's a fine theory. But in the study of the paranormal that I'm doing right now, I'm reading monster encounters by people who are saying, like your next door neighbor who's saying, "Listen, I saw Bigfoot," right? Or the Mothman encounter that happened just a few hours from here in West Virginia. Stories of vampires out of Central Europe. I mean, when you really go in and look at some of the stories, either from long history, long ago, or today, like I said, like your next door neighbor, you will hear or read stories about monsters that are being communicated very earnestly by people who did not think that these things existed, had an encounter, they cannot explain it away. It was not a flicker of a shadow. Their encounter was so palpable and real to them that it forces them to ask themselves the question, what is the nature of reality? Is there order behind all things? Or is it just kind of a chaotic unfolding of different things in different dimensions and different kinds of beings? And if so, then monsters, right? Yeah, I mean, they might be here, which can be scary to people, right? Because the monster then would not just represent a more kind of like a chaotic structuring of the universe, but potentially a dangerous one for us as well. Or if monsters are in the created order, what does that say about a creator, right? Or the nature of creation itself? So too, monster stories would have us think about, what do we think about good and evil? I think that, we have this word monster, but we don't pause to think about what it means. I just published an article on this for the Journal of Gods and Monsters, which if you're not a subscriber, that's a great one for you to consider. But the word monster comes from the word monstrous, which means unnatural, also almost in the sense of evil as well. But you find the root word for monstrous, and you have another word, moner, and moner means a warning. And when I think about it that way, and I think about people having encounters with monsters, again, not just symbols, not just anxieties, but when I read people talking about monsters, and let's go back to a common one that some of you might be familiar with, like Mothman. Well, the Mothman encounter in West Virginia, if you know the story, Mothman disappeared after a great tragedy of the town's bridge collapsing and people dying. In which case, the Mothman maybe wasn't evil or chaotic. The Mothman as a monster would have been more like, well, quite frankly, an angel, right? One who brings a message. So I think that there's a lot for us to do in the study of monsters, especially when we read or we listen to people respectfully say, I did have a monster encounter. Listen a little bit more carefully and ask, at what level did they encounter the monster, and how did the monster inform what they believe, and really how did it shape their life? So for me then, if I was only talking to a room full of scholars, although I think we're all scholars and students of the paranormal, each in our own way, I would say this, and I would encourage all of you as well. Scholars of religious studies need to do more work in this area. There absolutely must be more work. And while higher ed right now, is going through its own things, we need more scholars that work at the intersection of religion and the paranormal. I think it would be really interesting if we could have some PhD candidates who are doing this kind of work to set themselves up for a lifetime of work. But as you can see on the screen, there is promising signs of growth in the academy that this is happening. So for example, Dr. Jeffrey Kripal, again, the scholar at Rice, he opened up an archive called the Archives of the Impossible, which collect these kind of stories and these experiences. And the academy that I belong to, which is the American Academy of Religion, that attracts scholars from around the world, we meet once a year. This year will be San Diego, and we have a religion and monsters seminar that is ongoing, where people are bringing in their scholarship. So I know that it's happening. I know that there are, as I've shown you, just a few scholarly books on this. Of course, there are other great names out there that are doing this work, but I still think that we are only scratching the surface in terms of the academic study of religion. What I'd also encourage everybody, if you wanted to study the paranormal through the lens of religious studies, is let's not run to deconstruct everything. As I was just saying, monster narratives oftentimes are pulled apart as saying, oh, this is just a social anxiety or fear about X, Y, or Z. I'm not saying that that kind of a study isn't helpful. I think that it can be. But why aren't we studying the phenomena of the paranormal as seriously as we do the phenomena of traditional religion? If I were to go do a study on Catholic sacraments or Islamic pilgrimage, I wouldn't be necessarily deconstructing that. I mean, I guess some scholars do and would, but I would be asking myself the question, all right, what is the belief here? Who believes it? Why do they believe it? And how can I describe that accurately to others so others can respect what is in the hearts and minds of people? So please do consider doing more of that work. It might feel like you're providing first level descriptions, but that work is so important. If we don't have that, we can't do any other critical or creative analyses. I also think that the community, and by that I mean paranormal communities, could become or can become an object of study for religious studies scholars. And this is something that I think I could talk a lot about too, but I want to be brief. Just think about it. Think about UFO conferences. Not just UFOs, paranormal conferences like the one that we're in right now, even though we're all online. Paranormal gatherings and conferencing often take, in my mind, they often take the shape of religious gatherings because they create community, and a community that is not necessarily defined by pre-existing friendships or family relationships. Just like in a number of religious traditions where people come back to a group or a community and they hear the same stories over and over and over again and think about their meaning, is that not what we also do at times? We have certain stories that we keep visiting over and over and over again. Think about Roswell with UFO. How many times? And I don't think that's a bad thing, but we keep revisiting. And why do we do that? Because we're seeking meaning in that, and that's exactly what religious groups do as well. Christmas will be here any moment now, and Christians will retell the story of the birth of Jesus. It doesn't get old because when you believe in something or you care about something, you seek more information. So at our gatherings, at our conferences, what do? I don't want to say we want to rehash things we've already heard about, but we look at them a little bit more closely. Think also about how sought after speakers become authoritative leaders. We don't think that every single person who talks about the paranormal is somebody that we want to keep going back to. We tend to discern who has great insight here, who's doing the great work, who do we want to invite back, and suddenly they become a kind of cleric, right, in the tradition or in the field. So too, in a conference like ours, there will be new interpretations on stories that we've already heard that provide different perspectives. Religious traditions do this all the time. In fact, take a look at any number of sacred scriptures that will tell the same story, but say, but it wasn't exactly like you heard before. Like, here's a new understanding of this old story. Consider too that in the world of the paranormal, or in the realm of the paranormal, we have pilgrimages. People will travel to sites where somebody has encountered something. They will have a transformation while they're there, either deepening their beliefs, deepening their interest. And I think we create a ritual around this as well, in terms of how we gather, what we read, who we believe, what we contemplate in our heart of hearts when we ask ourselves the question, is any of this real? And I would even say music, right, which is a featured part of this conference as well, that we should be looking for the arts, the performing arts, I just have here music, as expressing paranormal beliefs or pointing towards these kinds of realities. So I do think that these are some great opportunities for study for those that want to. And then just a few closing thoughts from me, and thank you for sticking with me through this presentation. But as I have studied the paranormal as a scholar of religion and just as a human being, I think we can do this without getting into debates about religious truth. We can conduct this research. We can talk to people. We can write. We can offer presentations, bring communities together. We don't need to debate always what is true or what is not true. But I know this for a fact. As we pursue our analyses of paranormal subjects, people will want to talk to us about the religious dimensions of the paranormal. What does this mean about ultimate reality? What does this mean about what is really possible in life, death, and beyond? And people will want to talk to us about what they agree with and disagree with. I would say, unless you want to take the bait, don't always get into those theological disagreements, but just try to help people understand how these beliefs are very meaningful. And that leads me to my second closing thought here. Paranormal beliefs are absolutely not fringe. They are not bizarre. I know that's how the word shifted in the 20th and 21st century, but paranormal beliefs are, if according to the research, they are mainstream and they should not be ridiculed. And I think we really need to demand respect both in the academy, in the media, and in the public square. If we are going to go talk or present or gather a community around it or go on the local news or whatever it might be, I think we really need to request of them not to joke about what it is that we're studying, because people who have had these experiences, I think without exaggerating, they have been life-changing and definitely worldview changing. And the last point here, I think we need to keep doing exactly what we are doing here. And Ryan, thank you for putting this together. We need to create safe space for people to tell their experiences, collect their stories if they're willing to have their stories collected, and to respect the quest for truth. And that means for somebody like me that I will do my best to have my academic hat on, analyze, see what kind of information I can gather. But as I just said at the end of the day, I'm a human being too. And I'm asking myself the question, what's really real? What is the nature of ultimate reality? And that gets to the heart of who we are as humans. And that's why I think that both religion and the paranormal are deeply human experiences, but they open us up to grand possibilities. And I'm so grateful for each one of you, whether you're presenting in this conference or watching and taking notes. And again, I'd be happy to continue the conversation with everyone, but keep searching for the truth, keep being respectful, and I appreciate everybody's time that you've spent with me. And if you want to pause the video at this point and take a look at the text that I have provided for you, these are great ones to look up. And again, I'd be happy to talk more offline about other texts. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you for having me. And I look forward to hearing about the quest for truth that each one of you are engaged in. Goodbye.